In this video, we're going to talk about how to set up your own on-premises map tile server to serve maps into O-Calc Pro line design. Now, there are many ways to do this, and this is just one of them. As for an example, mostly it's going to look at what you have to do on the O-Calc Pro side, not on your side, because it depends on what kind of GIS you have, what kind of land base you want to use. Do you want to use satellite imagery? Do you have API keys to off-premises servers, and so on and so forth? But in this case, I'm going to do OpenStreetMap because it's free. So the first thing I have to have is a Linux server up and running on my machine, or some machine capable of running Docker. In my case, it's an Ubuntu 1804 LTS machine. So I happen to know the IP address because I've already had my IT department set this up. So I go to 10.103.10.86, and we open up SSH. Login is me. Okay, and the next thing we're going to do is install our Docker container. Now, the Docker container I happen to be using is the Open Map Tiles Docker container. There are many others, but this is the one I'm going to use. So we are going to do a super user do, so sudo. And we're going to go ahead and hook up to Docker container. So I'm going to say run Docker, and I'm going to go to openmaptiles.server. That's going to load up OpenMapTiles and run it on my machine. Now, the very first time you do this, it'll also ask you, using a little UI that it has built in, where you want data for. I happen to have installed it for New York, which is where I am, but you can install it for anywhere. You can even do the whole world, but that's extraordinarily expensive. You have to have a pretty heavy-duty machine, and you have to have plenty of disk space and plenty of CPU power, and it still takes a long time, but that's all right. You only have to do it once. So we're up and running. Now I can test that I'm up and running by pulling up any browser and going to that machine. So we go to 10. Now, by default, it puts itself at port 8080. You can change that in the configuration, but I just leave it alone. And you'll know that everything's working if a little test screen comes up. And the first thing it shows you, for this particular map tile server, is what various styles I have, and those are got to by doing various subdomains on this IP address. I'm going to use basic. Now here's the important part. What you want to do is you want to go to the viewer, and you want to go to the raster viewer, and click raster, and that'll pull up. And you see now it's starting to build the tiles. Now, it's a little slow because it's caching them up, but once it's cached them up, this will be much faster. Builds up the data that I loaded when I did my Docker installation. It happens to be from New York. What you need to do is just pick any arbitrary tile, right-click on it, and say copy image address, and then paste it in up here. And now you see the part we're going to need to set up O-Calc Pro. So the first part is the IP address and port 8080, then of our Ubuntu machine, then the style that we picked, which was the basic, and then these 3 digits, which change based on where this tile is and what the zoom level is, .ping, and then the system is going to dynamically serve that address. So let's copy that, and let's go ahead and fire up O-Calc Pro, and we go in the section called Display Map Tiles. We don't want to display them yet. And we go under On-Premises Map Provider, Configure, and we don't need a license key because this is our own machine, so we aren't going to require one. And then in the area down here where by default it goes 192.168.111, which is a fairly common thing that gets, we instead want to put in the value that we copied from up above. So we're going to paste that in, leaving the 1, 2, 3 in brackets, and then backspacing out. So we have the IP address. You notice now it's 10.103, 10.86.80.80, and the style we picked, which is not the default style. I just did that on purpose. But we leave the in braces 1, 2, 3. Okay, I am in compliance by definition because it's open source, and it's lesser GPL, so it's okay for me to use it as as a commercial entity. I say I agree. Now if I say display map tiles, boom, you'll see there's the tiles being served by my on-prem server, and we'll turn off the vector tile format, and there we go. It's serving them pretty quickly. Boom, 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 being served by my server. Everything's right with the world. I can say, if I want to improve performance even more, that I can cache tiles I frequently use to my own machine. With an on-prem server, there's really no need to do that. You could. If you're using a cloud-based server, I strongly recommend you use tile caching, because then if you've retrieved a tile once, it will then continue to get that same tile from your local machine, which really cuts down on the amount of internet bandwidth you use. The amount of intranet bandwidth you use with an on-prem server doesn't really account for much. I can change where it is. I can clear the cache out if I want to. But that's it. Now I've got my own map tile server up and running, and I would strongly recommend anybody who's going to use raster tile maps go this route, either using a caching proxy or using their own tile server. The setup would be the same either way, and that will vastly increase the performance with which map tiles are served to you, and vastly decrease the bandwidth and the latency problems that you might have going out to the cloud, especially if you have a large number of people doing it in a more than 2 or 3 or 4 people running O-Calc Pro.